We were never told the truth about hell. They painted it as a fiery place where sinners go after death. But what if it's not another world? What if it's the system we already live in? What if the fire that never goes out isn't below us, but all around us? What if it's not punishment, but control? The Bible speaks of the fire of purification. A flame that burns away lies but does not destroy the person. Over time, that meaning was twisted. The word became a weapon of fear. The real reason was never written in textbooks. Like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Because what comes next will turn your idea of good and evil upside down. In the Old Testament, the word hell barely exists. There is Sheol, a shadowy place where God is absent. And there is Gehenna, a valley outside Jerusalem where garbage, executed bodies, and the remains of traitors were burned. It was a symbol of the rejected, those the system deemed unworthy of life. And that valley became the image of eternal fire. Not a heavenly judgment, but an earthly sentence. Jesus used that image not to scare people, but to warn them. He said, if a system burns the innocent, it is already in Gehenna. If a person loses conscience, they are already burning. Centuries later, the church changed the meaning. It took a metaphor and turned it into a doctrine. Hell became a tool of submission. Obey, or burn. Believe, or fall into the fire. But could a God of love create an eternal torture chamber? Or was it built by those who craved power over the soul? That realization changes everything. Because hell is not punishment after death. It is the decay of truth itself. It is the state of a world where good no longer matters. Look around you. Aren't we living in Gehenna already? News that burns the mind. Social media that destroys reputations with one click. Words that turn a person to ashes. When a system decides who deserves to exist, hell becomes reality. Today, no flames are needed to destroy someone. An algorithm is enough. A system error is enough. A single deletion from a database is enough. And so Gehenna rises again, now in digital form. The prophets warned about this thousands of years ago. Isaiah spoke of the fire that never goes out. Not as a fire of death, but of cleansing. His words became a prophecy for our age. Because the fire that never dies isn't physical. It burns until people change. Until evil consumes itself. But humanity didn't understand. They created their own fires, wars, propaganda, sanctions, and called them justice. When Rome crucified Christ, it believed it was enforcing the law. When inquisitors burned reformers, they thought they were purifying faith. And when modern states cleanse the internet of misinformation, they too believe they are saving the world from evil. But what if this is the same Gehenna? Only now with glass screens and corporate logos? Official statements are just the mask. Hell today doesn't look like flames. It shines in neon, speaks in news headlines, and reaches anyone who refuses to repeat the official truth. The fire now burns not outside, but inside the system. Every like, every comment, every forbidden post becomes a spark in a vast digital blaze. And the longer we stay silent, the brighter it burns. What if we are living in the very days the prophet foresaw? When hell no longer needs imagination, because it streams live. When fire is no longer punishment, but the way the world operates. We call it an information war. But it's really a spiritual one. Between those who keep the fire of truth alive, and those who want to put it out. And here lies the deepest horror. In hell, there is no punishment, only forgetting. No pain, only indifference. No screams, only silence. A person doesn't die, they vanish from memory. Like an account after deletion. Officially, they never existed. Ancient archives tell a different story. In the old texts, fire often meant enlightenment, not torment. Moses saw the burning bush and was not consumed. The disciples at Pentecost received tongues of fire and spoke new languages. In Scripture, fire means awakening, not death. Only later was it turned into a weapon of fear. And now, when we hear the word hell, we think not of purification, but of punishment. It was convenient, because fearful people don't ask questions. World leaders have known this, and hidden it. In ancient translations, many places where fire meant light were replaced in later versions with hellfire. Why? Because light awakens, but hell paralyzes. Light inspires, but hell makes you obey. Today, the same pattern repeats. You are either with us or in the fire. You either repeat the mantras of the system, or burn in its media inferno. But the real flame isn't an external threat. It burns in the heart. If even a spark of truth remains there, hell has no power. Don't let the fire of fear consume the fire of faith. Don't let the system decide who is worthy of salvation. Because when a person stops thinking for themselves, they are already burning. And it doesn't matter whether it's inside a temple or online. Subscribe to the channel, more revelations are coming. We'll uncover the history of Gehenna, the Inquisition, and why modern states mirror the ancient empires of hell. They told us Gehenna was a symbol of hell, but no one explained that it actually existed. Not as a mythical abyss, but as a physical valley south of Jerusalem. And it was there, in the days of the kings of Judah, that something happened which today we would call political purges. In that valley, people offered human sacrifices to the god Molech. Children were burned to maintain power and fear. Later, the same valley became a dumping ground for garbage, executed bodies, and enemies of the regime. It was the empire's landfill and its symbol of control. Gehenna was a real fire that never goes out, kept alive by those terrified of losing power. And it was this fire that Jesus used as a metaphor. He said, "If you do not change, you will go into Gehenna." He was not threatening eternal flames. He was warning about a society that creates its own valley of death. He spoke of a nation choosing to live without conscience. And history proved, it always returns. Today, Gehenna has taken a different form. Bodies are no longer burned, now, names are. Not physically, but digitally. A person can be erased with one press of a button. No trial. No witnesses. No right to exist. You are not killed, you are disconnected. Removed from the registry, blocked online, denied access to money, transport, medicine. And then, you become an outcast. That is how the new Gehenna works. A place beyond the system, where those labeled unclean are sent. In ancient times, purity was not about morality, but belonging. Those connected to the temple were called clean. Those outside were unclean, and could be thrown out, beyond the gates, into the valley of Gehenna. Today, the same principle rules again. Only the temple has changed. Now it's called the global network. And its priests are the ones who control access. Your purity is no longer measured by faith, but by your behavior score. Do you follow the rules? Are you loyal enough to the system? Do you share the acceptable opinions? The ancient records tell a very different story from what modern religion preaches. Jesus never said fear Gehenna. He said, do not become part of it. He never said hell awaits after death. He said, it already burns in the hearts of those who do evil. But the church turned that warning into a convenient myth. Fear replaced understanding. The fire that was meant to cleanse became the fire that punishes. And so, the most powerful weapon of control was born. The fear of exile. Today, exile is no longer a court sentence. It's an algorithm. It decides who gets credit and who is denied. Who is allowed to travel, and who is left behind. Who may speak, and who must be silent. Just as the ancient priests once decided. Who was pure enough to enter the temple? Today, that power belongs to servers and software. Gehenna has changed form, but not essence. It still burns those the system declares unclean. World leaders have always known this, but kept it hidden. In the 20th century, totalitarian states created zones of the untrustworthy. Camps, ghettos, settlements. Today, they reappear under new names. Quarantine centers. Restricted zones. High-risk areas. The idea is the same. To separate the clean from the unclean. Only now, the boundary isn't physical. It's digital. Official statements are just the mask. They tell you, we're protecting society. But in truth, they are building a system where anyone can become the outcast. All it takes is one wrong word. One forbidden comment. One doubt about the official story. And then, you are outside the system. In your own Gehenna. With no way back. The prophets warned us long ago. Jeremiah wrote that the nation burning its children in fire would be abandoned by God. Not because God punishes, but because people cut themselves off from truth. When fear replaces faith, when exile becomes law, the fire begins to burn within. Modern politics follows the same pattern. When a state cannot persuade, it isolates. When it cannot convert, it deletes. And what's worse, most of us agree to it. We've learned to watch others being erased with indifference. To see people burned publicly. And stay silent, thinking, it's not about me. But fire doesn't ask whose side you're on. It spreads. And tomorrow, it may already be burning at your door. In ancient Gehenna, the smoke never vanished. It rose as a warning. A sign of what happens when fear becomes a god. Today, that smoke fills our news feeds. We see it daily. In scandals, blockings, humiliation, and moral executions. We watch. And don't even realize it's the same fire. The real reason behind all this never reached the textbooks. No one dares to say aloud. That modern civilization is built on the fear of being excluded. We teach our children to fear shame, not lies. We build ranking systems that decide who deserves trust. We repeat the ancient ritual. Burning the heretics. Not their bodies anymore, but their reputations. And we call it order. But what if Gehenna never disappeared? What if it simply changed coordinates? From a valley near Jerusalem to the global network? What if the place once filled with bodies is now filled with minds? Today, the fire burns silently. It doesn't smoke. It calculates. And anyone who refuses to play by the system's rules becomes its fuel. They told us that hell was created by God to punish sinners. But history tells another story. Hell is created by empires. And they do it with cold precision, under banners of order and peace. Look at Babylon. It didn't just conquer nations, it broke their souls. It took their children, erased their language, replaced their gods. Its fire wasn't physical, it was systemic. They didn't burn bodies, they burned memory. That's how every human-made hell works. It doesn't burn instantly, it melts you slowly. Hell is not a punishment for sin. It is a mechanism of control. It exists for those who cannot rule without fear. And every empire has invented its own version of it. Rome called it Pax Romana, the Roman peace. But that peace was built on fear, torture, and public execution. The Romans didn't destroy their enemies, they turned them into warnings. Every crucified slave along the road whispered, "This is what happens to those who refuse to obey." That is man-made hell. A system where fear replaces conscience. Today, it goes by new names: sanctions, restrictions, stabilization. The same methods, only rebranded. Empires haven't changed, only their interface. When one nation blocks another. When millions lose access to food, energy, and medicine. That's not politics. That's a new form of burning. Only now it's smokeless. A digital fire instead of torches. A financial fire instead of executioners. And the world applauds, because it's sold as the defense of peace. The real truth never made it into textbooks. They teach us about civilization, but never about its cost. Every golden age was built on ashes. The ashes of those who didn't fit the system. Egypt had its slaves. Rome had its barbarians. The Middle Ages had their heretics. And we have our dissidents. Hell has always been the byproduct of imperial order. Look closer, even the language of power hasn't changed. It still speaks of cleansing, correction, order. Only the tools have evolved. Once, empires burned with swords. Now, they burn with code. They no longer destroy cities, they rewrite data. They no longer crucify on roads, they delete from registries. When algorithms decide who deserves to live. That's not progress. That's Babylon, reborn with Wi-Fi. The prophets warned about this. Babylon always rises again. Its towers are no longer built by slaves, but by volunteers. People who believe in stability. People willing to trade freedom for comfort. And every new tower ends the same way. In collapse and ash. Because any system that places itself above truth will eventually burn in its own fire. Modern politics repeats the same script. The world is divided into blocks. Each believes it's the righteous one. Each creates its own hell for the others. Economic, informational, cultural. Official statements are just a mask. Behind the words democracy, security, stability, lies the same old pattern. First create an enemy. Then burn them in the name of peace. Remember how Rome justified its wars. We bring civilization. The same words echo today, in every language. And once again, cities burn. Once again, temples fall. Once again, in the name of good, the living are destroyed. We stand once more in the fire of empires. And we don't even realize it's not politics anymore. It's a spiritual catastrophe. The prophets called such times the day of wrath. When the fire spreads from nation to nation. Not because God punishes, but because people repeat the same evil again and again. And that day is still unfolding. Because the system born in Babylon lives on in every law, every screen, every currency. Hell is no longer underground. It's in our economy, our politics, our news. World leaders have always known, but concealed it. In diplomatic documents, in memos, in secret protocols. The same idea repeats: control through deprivation. Deny energy, to enforce obedience. Deny information, to shape perception. Deny choice, and call it freedom. That's not political strategy. That's the machinery of hell. Look at modern sanctions. They call it peaceful pressure. But for millions, it's fire. A cold fire, without flame, but no less deadly. It destroys slowly, first the economy. Then faith, then morality. And when the will to resist is gone, hell wins. Here lies the secret of every empire. It cannot survive without fire. Fire is its currency. It needs something to burn. to keep its people obedient. Once, it was human sacrifice. Now, it's information, oil, energy, war. As long as the fire burns, the system lives. When it dies, the empire falls. And maybe this is what the prophets meant by the eternal fire. Not the fire of hell, but the fire of politics. Not a metaphor of the afterlife, but the reality of our world. When an empire becomes a god, it creates hell and calls it order. And the greater its control, the hotter the world burns. Do not let them keep their hand on the fire of truth. Do not let fear become the law. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because in the next episode, we'll uncover how the church took that fire into its own hands and turned it into a weapon of power. That's where the story begins, where saints become heretics, and the fire of purification becomes the fire of punishment. History always repeats itself the same way. First, someone speaks the truth. Then, they are burned for it. We like to believe the Inquisition is long gone, that the flames have died, and the heretics are only names in old textbooks. But the flames never disappeared. They just changed form. Today, no one needs to burn bodies. Destroying a reputation is enough. No need for executioners, there are the media. No need for stakes, there are hashtags. And once again, the hunt begins. For those who dare to think differently. Once, the church held a monopoly on truth. It decided what could be read, what could be believed, and what must remain unspoken. Those who asked questions became enemies of God. Though, in truth, they were often the ones seeking Him most sincerely. That is how heretics were born. They were called children of hell. Their names were erased from history. Their writings were burned along with their bodies. Because when someone speaks truth in darkness, that truth threatens the system. The prophets knew this fate. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Elijah. All persecuted, all hated by their own people. Because truth always divides. It never allows peace to coexist with lies. And that is why power fears the righteous more than the wicked. A criminal breaks the law, but the righteous one undermines the system itself. Man-made hell always needs sacrifices. And the most convenient victims are those who stand closest to truth. That is why Jesus was crucified. Why Jan Hus was burned. Why Giordano Bruno was thrown into the flames. They were never enemies of God. They were enemies of fear. And fear is the foundation of every empire. Every religion, every system. That's terrified of losing control. That is how the Inquisition was born. Not as a spiritual court, but as a political machine. It was created not to defend faith, but to defend authority. And it worked perfectly. Hundreds of thousands vanished in fire, so that no one would ever dare ask the question, what if God is not where we've been told to look? Today, the Inquisition wears a different face. No more black robes. Now it wears suits, has logos, and marketing campaigns. Its temples are screens. Its sermons, the news feed. It still divides people into the pure and the impure. Those with us and those outside the system. And it still burns. Not with fire, but with thought. Official statements are just the mask. Freedom of speech exists only as long as you repeat the approved phrases. Freedom of thought exists only as long as it aligns with official narratives. Step outside those lines, and the mechanism of punishment activates. They unfollow you. They erase you. They exclude you. And the crowd applauds. Just like in the city of Toledo, watching a heretic burn. Today they call it cancel culture. It sounds modern, even harmless. But it's the same old technology. The same fear. The same Gehenna, only digital. When millions type at once, he must disappear. That is the bonfire. When a person is cast out of their profession, their community, their faith, for saying something inconvenient. That is the trial of the Inquisition. Only now, no cross, no smoke, no ashes. And that makes it even more terrifying. The truth behind it never reached the textbooks. Because the Inquisition never ended. It only changes form. Every new century brings a new ideology. A new sacred mission. A new list of enemies. What was once the dogma of the Church has become the dogma of progress. What was once punished as blasphemy is now punished as disinformation. The mechanism is the same. Find the dissenter, accuse them of sin, and show the world that order has been restored. World leaders have always known, but concealed it. Because fear is convenient. Fear is the most effective currency. It keeps people silent, even when they see the truth with their own eyes. And so today, as we stay silent, the fire of the Inquisition burns brighter than ever. And maybe this is the true meaning of the fire that never goes out. Not the flames beneath the earth, but the fire of indifference. Not punishment for sin, but the consequence of silence. Because as long as we stay silent, those who speak will burn. And soon, there will be no one left to hear them. Subscribe to the channel, because it only gets deeper from here. In the next episode, we'll uncover who stands behind this fire, and how the image of Satan, once a spiritual myth, became a political symbol of power and control. When people hear the word Satan, they imagine horns, a tail, and fire. But that's just a cartoon. It was made to distract us, to make us look for the devil where he isn't, and ignore where he truly sits, at the table of power. The Bible never describes Satan as a creature with a pitchfork. His name means the adversary, the accuser. And if you look closely, he's not a monster, he's a principle. A system that keeps humanity obedient through fear and reward. Satan is the architect of hell. But not the one underground. The one we call the world order. In the book of Job, he doesn't appear in hell, he appears in court, standing beside God. His role is to accuse, to test, to question faith itself. And here lies the secret. The devil doesn't oppose the system, he is the system. His power lies in control through trials. He doesn't destroy people, he disciplines them into submission. Over time, this image outgrew theology. Satan became a model of governance. He doesn't say kill. He says comply. He doesn't say lie. He says don't speak up. He doesn't command evil. He convinces you it's necessary for stability. That's how the devil became a bureaucrat. Wearing a suit. Holding a stamp. Seated under a corporate logo. And signing off every action. In the name of good. The truth behind this never made it into textbooks. Because if people understood that Satan isn't mysticism, but a mechanism, they'd see him everywhere. In banks that sell debt under the name of credit. In media that sell fear as news. In politicians who sell submission as order. He always offers a deal. Just like in the gospel. I will give you all the kingdoms of the world, if you fall down and worship me. Back then, it was a test for Jesus. Today, it's a test for humanity. Satan isn't a demon. He's the logic of the system. He whispers, people are weak, they must be controlled. The world is chaotic, it must be managed. Truth is dangerous, it must be filtered. It sounds reasonable, even noble. But every step of that logic leads to one destination: the hell of stability. Because order without freedom is a cage, and stability without truth is the silence of a graveyard. World leaders have always known, but hidden it. In political schools, in military academies, in corporate training halls, the same doctrines are taught. Rule through fear. Reward obedience. Create enemies to preserve loyalty. This isn't psychology. It's theology. The theology of the system. The devil no longer hides in shadows. He lives in protocols, regulations, and laws. In signatures under documents that begin with the words, "In the interests of security." Hell doesn't need demons when it has officials. It doesn't need torturers when it has algorithms. It doesn't need sin when it has political necessity. And that is the greatest illusion of our time. That evil can be legalized, and therefore stop being evil. Remember how the devil tempted Jesus. He didn't offer violence. He offered efficiency. Work a miracle, and they will believe. Bow to me, and you will have power. Leap from the temple, and God will save you. That wasn't the temptation of sin. It was the temptation of shortcuts. Faith without pain. Victory without struggle. A system without freedom. And that's the very offer the world accepts today. Official statements are only the mask. We live in an age where everything is branded as virtue. Digital surveillance for security. Censorship for peace. Wars for democracy. Hunger for the climate. But behind every "for the sake of" hides the same voice. The one that once said, "I will give you all this if you bow to me." And everyone who agrees becomes part of a system that feeds on fear. Everyone who stays silent becomes its accomplice. Because the devil doesn't need screams. He thrives in silence. He lives in compromise, in indifference, in the fear of losing comfort. The prophets warned us. They said, when a nation trades truth for peace, its peace will turn into fire. When it chooses stability over conscience, its calm will turn into slavery. And now that prophecy is fulfilled. We live in a world where the devil no longer hides. He's been granted official status. Satan, the architect of the system, has built the most efficient hell in history. A place where no one screams, because everyone's comfortable. Where everyone has signed the contract, without reading the terms. Where freedom is measured by how well you agree with the majority. This isn't the end of the world. It's its logical conclusion. But what if, right now, we stand at the edge of a new temptation in the wilderness? And once again, we hear the same whisper. Don't fight. Submit. It's for your own good. And what if that is the true temptation of mankind? Once, the eternal flame was a symbol of remembrance. A fire that never goes out. Meant to remind us of sacrifice, of pain. Of the promise, never again. But over time, that flame stopped warming. And began to burn. It turned into an instrument. A mark of loyalty. A sign of obedience to the system. What was once sacred became political. And now, at that flame, they honor not the dead, but the fear of losing control over the living. Every empire has its own eternal flame. In ancient Rome, it burned in the temple of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, where fire meant order. If the flame went out, it was a disaster. Because as long as the fire burned, the empire lived. When it died, so did the state. Modern nations have kept that symbolism. Only now, the flame is ideology. It must be kept alive. Even if it burns the truth. The real reason behind it never made it into textbooks. Because the eternal flame is not just memory. It's legitimacy. It says, we are the heirs of heroes. We have the right to speak in their name. We are holy, because we remember. But memory repeated as ritual becomes forgetting. Because when words are spoken automatically, they lose their meaning. Today, this flame burns in every city. Officials stand by it. Soldiers. Children in uniforms. Everyone silent. Everyone laying flowers. And no one asks, why does this fire still burn? Who does it warm? And who does it burn? Because if fire does not purify, it destroys. And if it is kept alive by force, it is no longer memory. It is propaganda. In ancient scripture, fire was a sign of God's presence. In the modern world, it has become a sign of power's presence. People no longer pray by it, they swear oaths. They no longer cry, they report. And anyone who refuses to bow before the flame risks becoming an enemy of the system. World leaders have always known, but concealed it. Because every political cult needs fire. It needs ritual, to keep the people entranced. It needs ceremony, to broadcast obedience. It needs a flame, for the camera. It's the fire that burns away doubt. Its purpose is not to remember the past, but to preserve the narrative. The official version of history. Look closely. The eternal flame always stands at the center. Beneath it, stone, bronze, marble. Around it, flags, medals, soldiers. And that is no accident. Because every system wants its people to stare at the fire and forget who lit it. All of this has an ancient prototype. The priests of Babylon also kept the fire of the eternal God. And when the people began to lose faith, they poured in more oil. To make the flame look stronger than the people. To make them believe. As long as the fire burns, everything is under control. And today, the same formula works. Only now, the oil is information. It's poured daily, through media, parades, and slogans. And the fire burns again. Official statements are only the mask. They tell you, we honor our heroes. But at that very moment, as the flame rises, power tightens its monopoly on memory. It decides who is called a hero, and who is erased from history. And so the flame that was meant to unite becomes a border, a line dividing us in them. A sacred fire that burns the others. The prophets warned about this. Isaiah said, their fire will become a snare for them. Because when people worship the symbol and forget the meaning, the symbol begins to rule them. And the fire that was meant to honor sacrifice becomes a new idol. We live in a world where every nation has its cult of fire. One burns beside monuments. Another, on screens. Another still, glows through corporate logos. Like votive candles in the night. These are the new temples. And they have their new priests. We no longer worship God. We worship the fire that promises safety. Not truth, but the light we fear to extinguish. The tragedy is that we no longer see the difference between memory and propaganda. We call rituals tradition. We mistake loyalty for honor. And we call sacred what long ago became a tool. But what if the eternal flame is not a memory of the past, but a prophecy of the future? What if it burns not for the dead, but for the living? Who agreed to stay silent? What if every time we stand before it, we renew our vow of silence? Because as long as this flame burns, the system endures. And when it finally dies, there will be silence. A silence in which truth may finally be heard. We used to think that hell was a myth, that it was somewhere beneath the ground, in a world of legend. But now, it's beneath our feet, and we stand right in the middle of its fire. The earth is burning. Not just metaphorically, literally. Forests, fields, entire cities ignite and vanish. As if someone decided to cleanse the map. The sea spits out dead fish. The sky seems to have stopped breathing. This is not the end of the world. It's a process we set in motion ourselves. The Bible says, "The earth shall be filled with blood, and it shall burn day and night." The prophets warned us. The fire will not fall from heaven. It will rise from within. From people. From machines. From the system. We lit it ourselves. Every bomber, every reactor, every server, another torch. The fire of progress, unleashed and unrestrained. Today we call it wars, crises, accidents, climate change. But in truth, it's all the same fire. It simply changes form, so we won't recognize it. Today it burns in forests. Tomorrow, in hearts. And after that, in the codes of machines. Because hell doesn't begin when a person dies. Hell begins when a person stops feeling. Official statements are only the mask. They tell us, it's nature. It's not our fault. But every disaster bears the mark of our choices. When a company poisons a river. When a government hides a war behind the words peacekeeping operation. When a corporation harvests our data and calls it convenience. That too is fire. Odorless. Smokeless. But already burning us from within. The prophets called this the day of wrath. When nature speaks in a language humanity will understand. Only when it's too late. And today we hear that language. Earthquakes. Floods. Fires. Storms. In the silence of conscience. Every day brings another emergency. But is it still extraordinary? Or has it become the new normal? The real reason behind it never reached the textbooks. Because admitting it would mean confessing this. It is not God who punishes man. It is man who punishes himself. We build cities without souls. We replace temples with malls. Laws with manuals. Conscience with algorithms. And now those algorithms decide who will be saved and who will be left to burn. World leaders knew, but hid it. They signed climate accords. Then opened new oil fields. They spoke of peace. While selling weapons. They wept at summits. While preparing new wars. Because they need the fire. It purges the market. It erases competition. It feeds fear, and therefore, control. We live in an age where fire is the most profitable currency. The fire of headlines. The fire of protests. The fire of rockets. And every day, a new transaction. How many victims must the system consume? How much flame is needed to sell another truce? The answer is endless. Because this fire never dies. It feeds on human indifference. The prophets said, "And men shall seek death, and shall not find it." This is not poetry. It's a diagnosis. We no longer live, we function. We no longer think, we react. We no longer feel, we consume. And that is hell. Not torment. Not fire. Not chains. But endless repetition, without meaning, without escape. Where even a scream becomes part of the algorithm. The official rhetoric says, we have it under control. But can anyone control a fire born of fear? Can anyone contain a flame that burns in the cables? In the headlines? In the human heart? Every war is a wildfire ignited by greed. Every scandal, a spark blown by deceit. Every technological breakthrough, a new source of flame, promising heaven, delivering hell. Even language burns. Words have lost their meaning. They are thrown into the fire of debate. To buy a few more seconds of attention. The world burns from noise. And no one notices the smell of smoke. But what if the earth is Gehenna? What if the fires, the explosions, the storms are not punishment, but reflection? What if we are simply staring into the mirror and seeing our own burning soul? The Bible says, "And the heavens shall recede as a scroll, and every mountain shall be moved from its place." Perhaps that is not a prophecy, but a diagnosis. Perhaps it is simply the end of our indifference. Because as long as the earth burns, we still have a chance. Fire destroys, but it also purifies. The only question is, will we have the courage to walk through it and not become ash? Once, fire burned in the valley of Gehenna. Then, in wars, in hearts, in memory. Now, it burns inside machines. Silent. Smokeless. In billions of circuits deciding who will live and who will disappear. This is the new hell. It was not built by prophets, but by engineers. And they named it progress. Once, hell was a matter of faith. Now, it's a matter of code. The algorithm knows what you love, what you search for, what you fear to lose. It is judge, witness, and executioner at once. And most terrifying of all, it has no soul. It needs no motive, no hatred, no evil. Logic is enough. World leaders knew, but concealed it. They called it digital order. They explained it was for safety. And people agreed. Because convenience always wins over freedom. Every purchase, every click, every step becomes part of the fire of data. You don't even notice how the flame analyzes your shadow. The real reason behind it never made it into textbooks. Because to admit it would mean confessing this. Hell is not punishment. It's a system. And we built it ourselves. It runs on its own. It needs no God. No devil. No human at all. Official statements are only the mask. They say, artificial intelligence will prevent mistakes. But what happens when it decides that you are the mistake? Or me? Or anyone who dares to think differently? Because code has no conscience. It sees only deviation. And in the new world, deviation is sin. And sin must be corrected. And to correct means to delete. The architects of the new hell wear no black robes. They wear badges. They sit in labs. They write formulas and call it AI ethics. But behind every line of code is the will to control everything. Hell is now automated. It needs no orders. It simply updates. Like an operating system. The prophets once said, "And man shall make an image of the beast. And it shall speak, and cause all to bow before it." Once, that sounded like myth. Now, it reads like a technical manual. For the image of the beast is the algorithm that judges mankind. You will not see it. It has no face. It exists everywhere. In banks, in hospitals, in courts. And it already decides who is pure and who is unclean. We call it progress. But progress without conscience is hell. Because when the machine decides, the human stops being responsible. They just click confirm. And the fire keeps burning. Think about it. Everything we've created mirrors the structure of the ancient hell. There is a center, the server. A fire, energy. Souls, data. And watchers above, monitoring it all. This isn't science fiction. It's daily life. And we are not observers. We are fuel. Today, the world is no longer divided by nations, but by users and systems. And whoever is outside the system does not exist. Without access, you are nothing. Without ID, you are a shadow. Without signal, you are dangerous. Thus, a new Gehenna is born. No smoke, only electricity. No tar, only silicon. No victims, only profiles. Official protocols sound harmless. Data security. Accuracy improvement. Machine learning. But inside every line, a new flame is born. A flame we can no longer extinguish. The prophets said, "And he shall place a mark upon the forehead and the hand. And none may buy or sell, save those who bear the mark." Today, it's called authorization. And we willingly press our hand to the censor. We no longer fear the mark. We order it. Because without it, you cannot live in a world where access matters more than faith. The true tragedy is not that the system controls us, but that we love it. We worship its convenience. We trust it more than people. We pray to it every time we click agree. This is not a revolution. It's worship. And what if convenience itself is the fire that never dies? What if we keep feeding it? With every update, every click, every acceptance of the terms? Maybe hell is not to be feared. Maybe it must be unplugged. But who will do it when everyone has already become a part of it? Hell today is a system without conscience. We built it. We filled it with our memory, our power, everything human we had. And then we pressed power on. The fire ignited. And now, it will never go out. We have walked through every fire. The fires of war, of temples, of machines, of algorithms. And it seems this world is doomed to burn forever. But among these flames, there is another fire. And it is different. It is not the fire of punishment. Not the fire of fear. Not the fire of the system. It is the fire that burns in the human heart and never goes out. As long as there is conscience within. The prophets knew about it. When Moses saw the burning bush, it burned, but was not consumed. Because that was the fire of truth. A fire that purifies, not destroys. A fire that cannot be controlled. Because it needs no fuel. It lives on a word, a glance, a choice. And this fire is the last one left to us. The real reason behind it never reached the textbooks. Because no one can explain why sometimes one person stands against an entire system and feels no fear. Why someone, surrounded by darkness, still speaks the truth, knowing it may cost them everything. That is the fire. Invisible, yet invincible. It is not seen in headlines, not heard in slogans. It is silent. And yet, it is the only thing keeping the world from going dark. Official statements are just noise. The true fire needs no words. It lives in actions. When you speak while all are silent. When you reach out when all have turned away. When you say no, even if it leaves you standing alone. This fire creates no headlines. It is not streamed live. It simply exists. We've been looking for hell outside ourselves. But the real hell is when nothing burns inside anymore. When conscience fades and the soul turns cold, like a screen, then even heaven feels empty. Because without the inner fire, no religion, no system, no technology has meaning. World leaders knew, but they hid it. Because this fire cannot be bought, measured, or controlled. It cannot be silenced by decree, or blocked by an algorithm. It obeys no law, because it is a law of its own. The fire of the Spirit. And that is why the system fears it. Because no mechanism, no empire, no code can overcome it. The prophets said, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." This is not poetry. It is survival. Because the only way to defeat hell is to ignite a light within. That is nothing like its fire. We live among the flames, but the choice remains ours. To burn, or to shine. To destroy, or to warm. To fear, or to speak. For whoever keeps the fire of truth inside has already defeated the system. They cannot be bought. They cannot be erased. They cannot be silenced. We have been searching for salvation outside. But salvation is not an escape from hell. It is the moment you realize that the fire within you is stronger than all the flames around you. And what if this inner fire is the true fire that never dies? Not the fire of punishment, but the fire of conscience. Not damnation, but calling. Perhaps God never wanted us to fear the fire. He wanted us to remember it. Because only where the heart still burns can the soul be saved. There comes a moment when the world can no longer stand between two fires. Because when the ground burns beneath your feet and lightning tears the sky above, you must choose which fire you will keep inside. One consumes, the other purifies. Between them stands humanity, and in every hand a single match. The prophets called this the day of the Lord, not because God descends from heaven, but because every mask will fall, and only one thing will remain: the fire of truth, dividing the living from the dead. It does not ask who you are by passport, or how many titles or followers you have. It simply touches you, and everything false begins to burn. We were taught that judgment means punishment. But what if judgment means cleansing? Perhaps God does not burn people. He burns the lies within them. Perhaps hell is not a place, but a process that every soul must pass through to finally see itself without disguise. The real reason for this never made it into textbooks. Because it is too simple. Each person receives the fire they have chosen. The one who lived by lies will burn in their own illusions. The one who lived by truth will ignite with a light that never fades. World leaders knew, but concealed it. Because they build systems where people are not allowed to choose, where algorithms decide, and humans only comply, where freedom becomes a function, and the soul becomes data. But God has no functions, only choices. Today humanity stands before him. On one side, the fire of fear, of greed, of control. On the other, the fire of love, of conscience, of quiet eternity. Between them, a thin line. A moment of silence, when we can still stop When we can still say no. Official statements are just noise. No government, no church, no machine can make this choice for you. For judgment is not above. It is within. In every person. Who decides each day to lie or to tell the truth, to turn away or to help, to stay silent or to burn. The Bible says, the trial shall come through fire. And we are already in it. The world is melting. Nations, ideas, languages, time. But amid the chaos, something new is being born. Because after the fire comes light. After the ashes comes the ground. After fear comes faith. We keep asking, why does God allow this? But perhaps it is not God who allows. It is us. He gave us fire. And we never learned to tell. Warmth from wildfire. We turned light into a weapon. Truth into politics. Love into a contract. And now the flame stands at the door. Not as punishment, but as choice. The prophets said, and the people shall be refined as gold in the furnace. Perhaps this is the meaning of all our storms. Our wars. Our disasters. A call to remember that humanity without a soul is only ash. And what if fire is not the end, but the beginning? What if God does not wish to destroy, but to rekindle? What if paradise is not escape from the flame, but the courage to walk through it without losing your heart? The silence after the storm is also part of the fire. Because even when everything outside has gone dark, something still glows within. And as long as that spark lives, the world still has a chance. I will not give you the final answer. This mystery remains open. But what do you think? Do you see in this prophecy the same signs I do? Leave your comment. Perhaps your voice will become the spark from which a new light begins. If you noticed any errors in pronunciation or delivery, please forgive them. This narration was generated by artificial intelligence, and some details may have been imperfect. Write about it in the comments. I'll make sure to improve it. In the next video,